I want to talk a bit about a teenager named Jordan Edwards who was murdered by a police officer this weekend in Balch Springs, Texas. There's really no other way to put it. It's a sad story that's developing fast, does not look good for the cops. There you're seeing Jordan Edwards, 15 years old, and the same sort of story that regrettably happens constantly. He was a great student, a great athlete. His loss obviously affecting not just everyone who knew him at school, but his family absolutely devastated. But we want to break down what actually happened because the messaging coming out of the cops has been fairly insane. The way that initially they tried to protect the police officer who did this, who's now been put on administrative leave, and we hear is possibly about to be fired. So initially, the night of, this is what the police said about what happened that led to Jordan's shooting.
While officers were out at the location, they heard gunfire. There was an unknown altercation with the vehicle backing down the road towards officers in an aggressive manner. An officer shot at the vehicle, striking a front seat passenger.
So right there, very clear, the people in the car were reversing in an aggressive fashion. And it's not coincidence that they use that terminology because of course, while we're gonna get to it a little bit later on, police are not supposed to fire at moving vehicles to begin with. The argument to do so that's often given by police is it was in defense of my life, they were using the vehicle as a weapon. Now, it came out from the people in the car by their lawyer that that's not at all what happened. And it turned out that the police eventually caught up to the truth as well because just yesterday, this is what the police were saying.
I unintentionally incorrect yesterday when I said the vehicle was backing down the road. In fact, according to the video that I viewed, the vehicle was moving forward as the officers approached. I'm saying after reviewing the video that I don't believe that it met our core values.
So what you had here was a party where there was a report of possible shots being fired. Police go to the location. Some people are in a car, including the deceased, who tries to leave. And now the cops eventually acknowledging that they were not using the car as a weapon. But we get a little bit more information coming out of the lawyer for the deceased who said Jordan's older brother was maneuvering out of a parking space near the party when they, quote, heard someone shout profanity at them. The person did not identify himself, but appeared to be a cop and was shining a flashlight at the car. They say that before the driver could respond, the unidentified police officer fired multiple shots at the vehicle. And specifically, reports say that it was actually the side windows that were shot out, which again, takes away the idea that they were backing up at the cop and he somehow shot out the side windows doesn't make a lot of sense. And he was firing a rifle from fairly close range. That's what they're saying now. And it took about a block of driving for the passengers to realize that Jordan had been shot, mortally wounded, died shortly thereafter. And so this is a sad story. Unfortunately, in America, it's not a particularly rare story. Now, the cop was put on leave. He might be fired. He hasn't been arrested, but even the cops are admitting that this does not rise to their core values. Even if you believe that there were shots fired and someone gets in a car and starts to drive away, I don't understand why cops believe that that gives them a license to execute anyone in the car. The idea that you can't call in for help, that you can't track the vehicle, the idea that they have signed their death sentence, even if they were trying to flee. I don't understand why that is always the defense of the cops and they believe that it's acceptable.
I'm kind of having a hard time even discussing these things anymore. A lot of people that I know don't even watch these videos anymore because we're just watching the same things over and over. And I don't want to see in reports where we say that it fatally struck the front seat passenger. And those are the words that we have in our society that aren't encapsulating what really is happening. I want everybody to think for a moment about what this situation is. You're a 15-year-old boy finally going out to a party where you feel like some kind of independence, like you're going to go out into the real world. And when you're at this party, something tragic happens and you hear gunshots and you run to a car and you want to get out of there. And who would anybody even be telling you that you should look to for help? You should be looking to the police. And that's not what ends up happening. Instead, an officer fires a rifle into the front seat of the car because maybe he is scared, because we have a society that tells us these things and that cops should be scared and that guns are everywhere. But during that process, when they're leaving, it's not just that boy who was shot. It's not just Jordan Edwards. It is everybody in that car when they look over and they see smoke coming from his head because a rifle round went through their friend because they went to a party and our state state-sanctioned officers can't properly respond. Not only is everybody in that car generationally traumatized from this, the entire neighborhood is, the community is. We see it when we go forth. Now the cop is even traumatized after seeing this. He's not gonna understand how to process this. This is gonna be a dramatic thing. He doesn't understand how to have fear. He wasn't properly trained to do any of this. And now the 911 caller who originally called because there was loud noise or disturbance at the pool. Now, when you call 911, you know that the result of your actions ends up being these families and everybody traumatized because of your actions. What does that make you do when you want to call 911 again to actually solve a problem? This is not about people, this is about systems. And I need everyone to really look. This is like a terrorist attack on our communities from their perspective. And what makes it worse is you're paying for that. They're paying for their own oppression at the other end of that. And your silence is condoning it the entire time.
Why were the police there in the first place? Because the only way for an event to escalate into some kind of scenario where somebody is fatally shot is that the police need to be on the scene in the first place.
Yeah.
So why were they there? Apparently there were reports of, quote, underage drinking and noise. Now,
dear God, noise?
I would find it weird for a group of teenagers to not be emitting noise and engage in underage drinking.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of take a step back and think to ourselves, why is it that such huge swaths of the population obviously feel compelled to seek police intervention for the most routine activities? Because if you don't call the police, then there's no chance whatsoever that something can escalate into a deadly incident. It kind of reminds me of the videos that we see with such frequency when a traffic stop escalates into a fatal encounter, right? If the police weren't in the position where they're surveilling people so closely and scrutinizing their behavior on the road without any kind of real public safety interest in mind, then you would lessen the incidence of these things happening in the first place. And I think that's sort of what has to be addressed from a structural standpoint. Otherwise, it's just an inevitability that these things are going to be happening over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you and look, there are programs, we're going to talk in a story a little bit later on, programs that like sort of are supposed to clue in cops to areas where they're more likely to be needed, and so they park themselves there. That can lead to situations like this, sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, I mean, there's an inequality to this that, again, like you, it makes it hard to, I know people don't watch these videos necessarily anymore because they can't take it anymore. I understand that. It's hard to talk about them constantly. It's one of the reasons I sort of try to back off emotionally and try to look at it only intellectually to protect myself, because when you do this year in and year out, it starts to take a real toll on you. When you watch the videos of the families who just had their entire lives ruined because of this terrible, terrible thing that was done. But the inequality of, if a call comes out to the cops at a party in this area, it can lead to a shooting. If I had been invited to parties when I was younger and I had gone, it wasn't gonna happen in my area. The cops would not go there looking to shoot. It wouldn't actually happen. If I get pulled over by the cops, they're not so scared that their gun is in their hand and they're ready to fire, something that happens all too often. It's the inequality of assuming an area is dangerous, and you pointed out the fear. Fear in America is never more dangerous than when a cop is experiencing it. And they're trained to be afraid, and their fear has fatal consequences.
Their fear has been codified into law as reasonable justification to kill. Understand, a police officer only needs to believe that their life is in danger or someone else is in danger for them to take fatal action legally. So we have codified their fear, and now that they're normally fearful, then we've codified that a fearful cop is normal and can thus kill anybody they want.
And on that point, a really telling aspect of this is that just after the incident took place, the officer who fired the fatal shots was allowed to be spirited off and given time to, quote, decompress. Now, if a normal citizen shot an unarmed person, let alone a minor, and killed them, do you think they'd be just kind of given the opportunity to hide away for a while and get their story straight and, quote, decompress? I sort of doubt it. To me, that's a form of what I would call blue privilege.
But one other thing, obviously the family, not just emotionally devastated, but also financially devastated because now they suddenly have a funeral. They're going to have legal fees that they have to pay to try to get some sort of even individual justice out of this. And so if we can advance to graphic 22, there is a You Caring fundraiser set up by the family. It's the only official fundraiser going on. So if you're interested in possibly helping out the family of Jordan Edwards, that is one way that you can do that.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks. You power this show. Together, we built something amazing. We've broken stories like the Donna Brazil story the mainstream media wouldn't break. We built the studio, we built this network. It's now #1, all thanks to you guys. Let's come build it even bigger and stronger. TYTnetwork.com/join.